Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers. If you're new to my live streams, we usually talk about the latest developments and then open the space up for the community's participation, including any questions or comments. Tonight, I wanted to talk to you about the important development with the declaration of Hamas that they will no longer be talking with Israel up until they release all of the Palestinian prisoners that they should have released several days back after the Palestinian resistance handed them the Israeli prisoners of war. So there were a couple of statements and there were other moves happening from Israel, including new proposals. And that's something not abnormal. Benjamin Netanyahu has done it before. But let's get into the details of what exactly happened and what's the likelihood of the ceasefire collapsing, or is it going to be a case of Israel delaying again and then something getting resolved? So there was a declaration today from Hamas, no negotiations with Israel until the Palestinian prisoners are released. In particular, there was a Hamas figure, a senior figure in Hamas, who said that there won't be any talks with the enemy. His name is MahmoodOD. He said, no talks with the enemy through mediators at any stage before the release of the prisoners who were supposed to be released in exchange for the 6 Israelis as agreed. The mediators must force Israel to abide by the agreement. This is the first time since the beginning of this current ceasefire that Hamas are saying we're no longer talking. There were certain demands from Hamas, like they gave Israel an ultimatum previously if they don't abide by the agreement, especially with the humanitarian clauses, that they won't release Israeli prisoners of war. Now, they've done that based on many reasons, and the main reasons were the Israeli breaches. The Israeli breaches, when it comes to the humanitarian clause of the ceasefire agreement, included many things like the smaller quantities of tents, hardly any temporary housing, lower amounts of fuel required, only 70% of the amount going in, and heavy equipment. That was problematic. Of course, Israel had other breaches as well, but from Hamas's perspective, they said we can't release the Israeli prisoners of war unless you get all of the stuff in. Then, of course, there was pressure being applied by the mediators, and Hamas ended up releasing those Israeli prisoners of war up until Israel said, oh, hold on a second, we're not actually going to release them now. Why? Because we don't like how Hamas are releasing the Israeli prisoners of war. Now, there was another report saying that, no, hold on a second, there are movements. There are certain movements. There are still talks. Israel confirmed that they are still willing to talk, and they have new conditions, though. What are these conditions? These conditions are the Palestinian resistance needs to be disarmed completely, and Israel needs to have security control over Gaza. Alongside demands, look, Hamas, you can't release the bodies of the Israeli prisoners of war or the Israeli prisoners of war in general, because Israel had a problem with these ceremonies that Hamas have because of the image and how much it affects Israel, debunks the whole lies of Israel. And now it looks like there's a bit of give and take. What's happening exactly? Well, Israel is firstly saying, we're still willing to negotiate. We're still willing to negotiate, but we have new conditions. These new conditions are, of course, completely rejected by Hamas, especially in relation to the disarming of Hamas. However, Hamas showed willingness to not have ceremonies if they will release further Israeli bodies. which means they will still have ceremonies if they release Israeli prisoners of war who are alive. But with the bodies, they said, okay, we can skip that potentially. Okay, what is the proposal now? Well, there were multiple talks from sources. Again, nothing has been made official yet, but clearly there are counter proposals coming from the mediators, and they're applying pressure on Israel to go back and release those people, because Hamas told them that's it. We're not talking up until these people are released. So the situation now is Israel and the mediators are coming to the Palestinian resistance with these offers to try and resolve the problem so that the ceasefire doesn't completely collapse. What are these proposals? Well, the proposal is Israel saying, okay, we might actually release 300. We want to release 300 Palestinians who were supposed to be released following the release of the Israeli prisoners of war, the 6 on Saturday. And after that, we will release a further 300. So we want to release 300. Hamas need to release 2 bodies. Hamas were due to release 4 bodies on Saturday. Israel saying, okay, let's hurry this up though. Hamas release 2 bodies, we'll release 300. And then we will release the further 300 in the next round. In the next round, as in the next few days. So we're talking about a deal that can happen potentially within 24 hours. Within 24 hours, Israel might say, yeah, that's fine. We reached a deal and we're going to release 300. Hamas are going to be releasing 2. But there's a problem. What is that problem? That problem is, well, Hamas now are not saying that they're going to release the bodies to Israel. So it's no longer a case of handing them to the Red Cross and then them going to Israel from Gaza, either to the Karm Abu Salem crossing, Kerem Shalom crossing, or any of the other crossings. Where would they go? What are they going to do with the bodies? They're going to send them to Egypt. Egypt will take the bodies of the Israelis who were killed by Israel, who Israel killed in Gaza during the genocide. And following that, the Palestinian resistance will monitor how Israel is complying and then move on from there. And that's a very interesting development. Why? Because we don't know if Egypt would keep them in case of an Israeli lack of compliance. So if Israel doesn't comply, is Egypt gonna keep them up until they say, yeah, move them on? What's gonna happen exactly? This is a very interesting development that is not in the favor of Israel. And that's because of their arrogance and stubbornness and Benjamin Netanyahu making things difficult. So you're no longer gonna have Israel is going to Israel directly. In case of this prospect succeeding, the prospect of this new deal, 300 in exchange for 2, and then another 300 in exchange for 2, and then we're out of the way with phase 1. In case that succeeds, that is, unless Israel decides tomorrow, fine, we'll release the 600 and just release the rest of them, the remaining 4. So it's tricky. Israel is making it difficult, like they always have been. They're used to breaching the agreements. And all of that is stemming from a frustration from Benjamin Netanyahu primarily. From Benjamin Netanyahu and his close allies, with the fact that they haven't been able to impose their will on the Palestinian resistance. They haven't been able to demolish the Hamas. They haven't been able to impose anything until they came to the negotiating table. And that's something Netanyahu did not want to do. Why? Well, because it's showing that these people are still there, number one, and 2, that they're strong. And the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu finally submitted to the same deal or the same core principles of Hamas with the red lines of getting the aid, ending the war, getting all of the people back to the north, and then later on to rebuild Gaza and have a prisoner exchange. The formula of the current ceasefire is in that shape. with, of course, different wording, slight amendments, slight adjustments, so that it doesn't look as damaging for Benjamin Netanyahu. That's also a massive blow for him. And that's why he hasn't released the details of the ceasefire agreement in Israel. And now we only have certain speculations or certain confirmations coming about the next phases or the next moves of the ceasefire in a way that Benjamin Netanyahu can try and spin around. And some of his moves now are also to show that he is dictating what's happening. It's an act of showing authority, showing who's boss. When Hamas, from their side, they actually had several statements that we can oblige, we can force Israel to comply with the ceasefire agreement. So there is, at the end of the day, a solid ceasefire agreement. How is that being taken in Israel? Well, firstly, it's being opposed heavily by the security establishment. Benjamin Netanyahu had a meeting with the top security leaders inside of Israel before he made that decision. And during that meeting, they told him no, they advised against it. They said you should not delay the release of the Palestinians because that would in exchange lead to Hamas saying that no, we're not actually going to release the remaining bodies. And we saw that now, one or 2 days just after those meetings took place. So after he got that advice and all of them said no, he went on to have another meeting. Again, look at how much he disregards the opinion of the security establishment inside of Israel. Then there are more harsh tones, harsh statements coming from the people in Israel. Firstly, there are more confirmations coming from the families of the prisoners of war that Israel almost killed their loved ones. Ilya Cohen, who was released by Hamas, he said that he miraculously survived after the tunnel in which he was held collapsed following an Israeli airstrike that was published on the Israeli channel 12 today. Then they're receiving more criticism and more confirmation that, hold on a second, Hamas, what they're doing is actually fine. Gideon Levy had an article in Haaretz in which he said we need to be honest here. Hamas's ceremonies to release the Israeli prisoners were respectful and well organized. It wasn't easy on the Israeli eye to see an Israeli kissing the head of his guards, but the Israeli presenters rushed to say that it was orchestrated. However, it did not appear so. That is in reference to the Israeli who kissed the heads of the Palestinian resistance fighters, who were most likely his guards, who were protecting his life. And like Ilya Cohen confirmed, well, these people were saving them from the Israeli airstrikes. But there is a more serious escalation. And that serious escalation is coming from the leader of the Democrats party in Israel, who's also the ex-IDF deputy chief of staff, Yair Golan, who is a very critical voice, especially for Netanyahu. He criticized Netanyahu a lot. He said, if Netanyahu collapses the deal, the gates of hell will open. So you have someone who was the deputy chief of staff in Israel saying that the gates of hell will open on Netanyahu from Israel if he collapses the deal. So what people need to understand is, apart from the fact that there is an actual ceasefire agreement, which is solid to a very large extent, there is a lot of pressure inside of Israel. And that pressure is coming not only from the Israeli public who want to continue with the deal, from the Israeli families, but from key figures in the security establishment and key figures who were previously in the Israeli army and key politicians as well, to a level where the opposition was telling Netanyahu, look, we'll give you the safety net that you need, but continue with the ceasefire agreement. All of that is problematic for Netanyahu, because what the Israeli public are saying is every day there are more happy Israeli families amidst all of this catastrophe. There are people who are happy to see their family members going back. And how is that happening? That's only happening by Israel going into negotiations with the Palestinian resistance and giving in exchange to get the Israelis back, giving in terms of aid, giving in more of the demands of the Gaza population. Of course, the withdrawal from the Netzarim, which was massive. That was a strategic place. The Netanyahu said, well, we're not going to withdraw from there. Returning everyone back to the north again, contrary to what Netanyahu and his generals were saying before. So we saw a lot of U-turns. However, Netanyahu is still showing or trying to flex muscles. He's trying to flex muscles because, again, he has been defeated. And Netanyahu being defeated is not something that he takes lightly. He is very arrogant with the people of Israel, with the people who he had alliances with. He's even very arrogant with the Israeli courts. Now, again, all of a sudden, he's getting this important letter when he's going to another hearing. He is refusing to show that his health file. He's refusing to show the courts that his health is fine or not really fine. The man had multiple operations now. So he's very problematic internally and externally. And if you imagine a man behaving like that internally, how will he be with the people who he's killing? Like this was reported today in Israel that he's refusing to present his medical records to a level where the courts in Israel are threatening to issue warrants. So he is an extremely difficult and unpleasant person in his day-to-day dealing, in his normal dealings. And that is being represented fiercely in the ceasefire and in Benjamin Netanyahu trying to constantly delay things from happening. However, the positive sign that, no, this might actually continue is the fact that Israel is giving and taking with the mediators, and they are having these counter proposals. And Hamas are also showing flexibility. They're saying, fine, if they want us to release 2, and then they release 300, and then 2, and then 300 instead of 6 and instead of 4 and 600 altogether, we're also happy to consider that. Showing, of course, dynamics from Hamas and showing how much of a pointless exercise that is from Israel. And what Israel has done in the past 16 months, in the past 15 months, well, before the ceasefire took place in Gaza, is apply all of this military pressure to get their desired objectives, try and impose their will, try and make the people kneel down, affect the social cohesion between the population and the resistance, and force the resistance to raise the white flags. And they haven't. Yet, they're still thinking that they might be able to do something in the negotiations. They will simply not. They will not succeed. The only way they can do anything if Benjamin Netanyahu keeps escalating is try and go back to the war, which is again going to be a lost case. But the main thing is that there are attempts to solve it. There were reports that it might be resolved within 24 hours. If it's resolved within 24 hours, that means the final hurdle of phase 1 would have ended. And then we are only faced with phase 2. And that's another reason why Benjamin Netanyahu is having these delays and putting these sticks in the wheels. Because Netanyahu wants to delay phase 2 as much as possible. He is going to try to extend phase 1. And in accordance to the initial proposal, and from what we understand about this ceasefire agreement, because again, a lot of it is speculation and things being published as and when, because the document is not in front of us. You know, I can't go and read 40 or 50 pages and tell you exactly what they say because they did not publish it. But it clearly shows that if there is no agreement on phase 2, or if the talks are not beginning on phase 2, there will be a continuation of phase 1, potentially with small mini deals. But that is not very likely to happen. If Benjamin Netanyahu would like to delay this further and try and push phase 2 for as long as possible, and then go into phase 2 thinking that he might extract more out of the Palestinian resistance and the positions and the stances and the political demands, and then go into it, that's a strategy for Benjamin Netanyahu. And the reason he's having this strategy is because he would prefer that there is no absolute end of the war, or at least a declaration of the end of the war. That would be to his benefit, because then he wouldn't have to change allies in his government. He wouldn't risk going to early elections, even with a safety net. And he would just continue to have his yes men without people giving him a headache. Because although Benjamin Netanyahu had so many allies before who know him directly and know how vile he is as a partner, as a political partner, yet he was keen to remain in the leadership, and he led Israel to 6 elections in 7 years. Like, people need to know the pattern of the man and how abhorrent he is individually. They were still looking to sacrifice and give him some sort of a safety net just to get the deal processed. But then he knows they will potentially flip on him very quickly and ask for early elections once everything is up and done. But he wants to avoid that. And he knows the only way to avoid that is in the current formula. The current formula, which includes people who were allied with him from the beginning, new partners he had in his government now who are nothing but yes men, who approve everything that he says. And he won't have a headache up until the next elections, and he can potentially look into completing the reform in the judicial system in Israel, giving him and his government, but ultimately him, full authority and control over the state of Israel. Because Benjamin Netanyahu and his plans to reform the judicial system in Israel include him making any changes that he wants. The only thing that's added to that is a small group of people having to approve it with him. And again, those 4 people would be people who Benjamin Netanyahu guarantees that they will approve everything he says, like the new defense minister, like Dermer now leading the negotiations, and like these figures in the Israeli political scene with Benjamin Netanyahu. So interesting few days ahead. We'll see how things proceed and hopefully keep covering it from there. And this was the main thing really that I wanted to talk to you about tonight. I'll open the space up for the community check. If you have anything, form any questions. Ram Plans is saying, I heard that Hamas sent a missile to Israel from Gaza. Is that confirmed? No, I didn't hear about that. Highly unlikely as well. I haven't heard that report anywhere, and I don't think they have an interest in doing that. Hamas, by the way, they comply very much with any agreements that they go into. It's Israel who always breaches agreements. And the reason that there was such a long delay up until this current ceasefire began is the fact that Hamas knows them very well, so they wanted as much guarantees as possible, to secure an actual ceasefire. And also you said that Shin Bet arrested 3 Israelis that they think were the ones who put the bombs in the buses. That is accurate. Although Benjamin Netanyahu immediately they declared that it was people from the West Bank, and they even wrote something in Arabic. But there were witnesses seeing these people fleeing, and there were arrests. Now, the question is how much that would be at odds with Netanyahu and his government. Also, the virus, thank you so much for that. Much appreciated. Let's go to your next question and participation. X-Fusion, listening to me and playing GTA. Can I ask you something? Thank you for that. You said if something happens, if America has peace with Russia, will Russia turn on Iran and the resistance and China? And you said, I'm driving around GTA listening to you. Enjoy GTA. I think Russia is, I think that the Russians are more clever than that. And I don't think that, Russia will have all of a sudden this trust and faith in the United States. Although Russia, by the way, Russia, they are reasonable in politics. Like if you listen to their leaders, to how they view like international politics and relations between Western countries and the United States, they don't have anywhere near the level of hostile approach that Western countries have with them. And when I say Western countries, it's primarily led by the United States. And when the United States decides to do a U-turn, other Western countries are left to it, like Europe is now, sitting there being shocked by Donald Trump doing a U-turn, in complete opposition to what Joe Biden has done for Ukraine, his support for Ukraine. And of course, putting aside the interests of Europe that were compromised because of their position with Russia economically, from an energy perspective, from the security perspective, all of that. And I think they know that Donald Trump is temporary. Donald Trump will have his term now. He's never going to be the president again, because you can't be a president of the US for more than 8 years. So they look long term. They might have someone who's more hostile next time. It's not like they're going to. But in the meantime, Russia would want to achieve its political objectives in Ukraine. And we're clearly seeing that happening. Trump is escalating the tone against Zelensky, saying you need to pay back. Ukraine might vanish. He's a dictator. All of that switch. Today, Israel and the United States voted against Ukraine. Can you believe that? And by the way, the US forced Israel to vote against Ukraine. There was a proposal to support Ukraine's territorial integrity. The United States of America and Israel, alongside a couple of other countries too, including Russia, voted against. That's a very big U-turn. But no, Russia knows, and by now, all of the other parties know, Iran and China too. And that's not to say that these countries don't want to deal like with the United States or with any other country too. It's just that all that they've been facing for the past almost century is arrogance, and these countries trying to impose their will on them, interfering, meddling, intimidating, terror, all of that against them. They want to deal with the US. As a matter of fact, China and the US, think about it, biggest trade partners on earth. How many trillions does the US owe China? So the only thing that they want is to have their own sovereignty and independence, their own financial systems or economic ways. And for the Americans, for the American administration, not to interfere with what they do and the decisions that they make, and start to impose sanctions using their leverage and reach globally, a reach that needs to be dealt with. You need to end that, and you need to have a world with more equally distributed power for the benefit of everyone. And thank you for that. And enjoy GTA again. And Sailor saying if they're going to bomb again, the US sent 200 pounds again, bombs again. Yeah, I mean, the United States wants to make sure that Israel can kill children at any given time. So the United States, you know, the patron of this genocidal entity, they want to make sure, like, if Israel wants to, you know, kill a couple of hundred children, they can do that with one missile. So they send them those missiles. You know, if they want to target hospitals, you know, they don't want the Israelis to worry. Oh, no, we're going to have to attack. No, one missile. Destroy the whole hospital and everyone inside it. So, yeah, it shows you really their position Holly, can you talk about the situation in the West Bank? It's very bad. For the first time in 2 decades, Israel is allowing tanks in the West Bank, in Jenin. These are scenes that we haven't seen since the operation in 2002 in Jenin. That's escalation. Israel forcibly expelled 50,000 people from their homes in some of the refugee camps in the West Bank. And they told them that you're not going to be returning for at least 1 year. They're killing people every day. 3 days, just over 4 days ago, and I posted that they killed a pregnant woman and her husband. They killed another lady by planting a bomb on her doorstep without telling her. They kill children every single day. They destroy the roads with the same D9 bulldozers that they get from the United States. It's very bad. But again, people need to understand why. And unfortunately, it's the people who suffer from it. But why? Why? These are the questions. Why are they doing that? Well, firstly, it's a representation of their true nature, an expansionist entity that is based on violence and mass expulsion and genocide and ethnic cleansing. But mainly now, for Benjamin Netanyahu's sake, Benjamin Netanyahu, he wants to show people strength. He is doing a lot of things for internal purposes. Lots of the moves and steps that he takes are intended to show his cult that he is still the king and he is still trustworthy. But the situation in general in the West Bank is very bad. And it has been bad, you know. Before the 7th of October, it has been bad for every single day, for everyone, a system of apartheid. People being prevented, banned from moving, lockdowns whenever Israel wants on hundreds of thousands of people, roads for Palestinians, roads for Israelis, checkpoints, journeys that can take you 15 minutes will take you 5, 6, 7 hours. That's if you're lucky to go through them. That's the reality of this apartheid state in the West Bank in particular. With the US, you see her saying, would Israel use nuclear weapons on Iran? I mean, they're mad enough to do anything, aren't they? But I think the decision of using nuclear weapons would have to be tied with the United States. And it's not a case of, you know, I decided to use a nuclear bomb, therefore, you know, here I'm going to land it. It's more complicated than that because it has far-reaching implications. And the first implications would be, well, you've given the country that you attacked every sort of excuse under the sun to use everything against you. You know, it's the weapon of the end of days, they call it. So it's not very probable, I mean, in the near future. But Iran has been threatened with that, by the way. Iran has been threatened with that through some of the messengers of Israel. They said that, you know, nuclear weapons can be used against you. And at the time, Iran replied, and that was approximately half a year ago, they said, we will respond with the same capacity. Same capacity. And not saying if it will be nuclear or not, because Iran doesn't publicly have nuclear weapons. But what is the same capacity? What, the same level of bombs? Or are they going to temporarily obtain a nuclear bomb from someone? That's probable, because they have been offered that from Russia and from North Korea too. And Gullyborg, Mahmoud, do you think the US is afraid to withdraw from any part in the region on a large scale after the disaster of Afghanistan in 2021? Interesting. I think the United States will end up withdrawing. There is no justification for their presence. They're finding it very difficult to justify their foreign presence to the American public. Not to say that, you know, Americans cannot be brainwashed. Oh, no, they can. Like other populations on Earth, they can be brainwashed on a mass scale. But now it's a bit more difficult. The world is more open now. People are seeing what's happening and why their countries are doing what they're doing, and Gaza contributed to that, the genocide in Gaza. But I think the United States will do, the administration of the United States will do whatever they want to do, regardless of what people think. This is what people need to understand. The withdrawal from Afghanistan, who felt the most betrayed? The US armed forces. Why? Because they said, we've been here for 2 decades to take the Taliban and, bring liberty and freedom and, bring women rights to Afghanistan and we all know these slogans and what they really mean. And we end up withdrawing, leaving trillions of dollars worth of equipment and bringing the Taliban back the next day. What did we go and die for? What are people suffering from PTSD for? Why are Americans committing suicide? 20 a day to 22 a day. That was a poll from statistic from 2019, if I'm not mistaken. 20 Americans a day commit suicide, suffering from PTSD. So did the administration care? Of course not, because they used them, they manipulated them, brainwashed them, threw them away. This is how they operate. You were fooled enough to go and believe me. Go to hell now. That's how they work. They don't care. And when they draw these plans, when they drew the plans for Iraq and for Afghanistan, they knew the cost of American human life, and they were willing to pay with the blood of their own people to get those interests or benefits or financial gain, gas, oil, whatever it is. So they will not really consider a lot, and they will worry and bother and annoy their allies. Israel is annoyed that the US is intending to withdraw from Syria. Europe, the whole of Europe, is annoyed because of the position of the administration now in relation to Ukraine and Russia, this massive U-turn against Ukraine. So they don't care. Do you think they could, if they don't care about like state level actors, would they care about the population? No. All that they're concerned about in politics and in many other Western democracies too, is to get elected. Once they're elected dictatorship. Now it's time for you to be quiet and we do whatever we want to do. And you have no say. It's as simple as that. So they wouldn't really consider it that much. And it's on the path of happening. We are witnessing it happening, but slowly, it doesn't happen all of a sudden. But these declarations, these moves, the withdrawal from Afghanistan after 20 years of killing innocent people in Afghanistan. And of course, that was also to a large part due to the resistance of the Afghani people. Like they were relentless in Afghanistan. So no, I think they will. They will, even if people will criticize them. I don't have a problem with that. And Trump is criticizing Biden from withdrawing from Afghanistan, although he was criticizing these foreign wars, yet supporting a mass-scale terror entity, mass terror entity. And now he has the audacity to go and ask Taliban to return all of the American equipment. He said, "Oh, Taliban, you need to return all of the, helicopters that we left." And Taliban told him, "This is, we obtained this by war. You can forget about it." So no, if they want to, they will leave, and it's not really gonna bother them that much. Oh, someone is saying, Iran Plan is telling me the man wasn't playing GTA. Oh, he was in Greater Toronto area. My mistake. I'm really sorry. I thought he was driving around GTA. The first thing is the man is choosing character in GTA 5 or something, and he's running over innocent pedestrians and listening. And also Rampling said that if Palestine would enter the BRICS, there would be a prospect, but of course there needs to be a lot of things happening before that. You need to have a state position, you know, you need to be physically a state. A lot of things need to happen, but that would be a natural move. BRICS is expanding now. And Alan is saying, greetings, Mahmoud. Greetings, my friend. He said, is the US really invested in phase 2, or are they aiming at prolonging the suffering prior to a voluntary withdrawal because it will put an end to the people's bad luck? I think that both Israel and the United States are interested in de-escalation and in a ceasefire, because both of them have been, they had a massive blow to their image. You know, a lot of what happens is the awareness, you know, the effect on the awareness, the effect on the image of each country. All of these things are very important. Both the United States and Israel have been hit really, really hard. And how do they recover from it? By having these megalomaniac statements and big, shocking statements to make a scene and try their luck with it. So Trump is saying, you know, expel the population. And again, then he has a U-turn. Likewise with other countries too. It's not like just with Gaza or whatever. He started off with Canada, calling Trudeau a governor instead of a, you know, and Greenland and Panama and Europe. I think they are invested. I think they do want a ceasefire. And I think they are trying their luck with their moves and with their delays. Of course, lack of compliance in agreements is not something that is strange, neither to the United States nor to Israel. Both of them. The United States has been breaching agreements since the days of the Native Americans. It's not new. Israel, you're founded on a facade and falsehoods. It's like, what does an agreement mean to you? They fake history. They have a fake identity. So what does an agreement mean to them? It's like, that's not in their nature. Deception is their nature. Deception and lies. And so, and this voluntary withdrawal thing, I think everyone knows by now that that's just a really big joke. There is no way of that happening. The people who stayed in their homes for 15 months after facing what Hiroshima and Nagasaki faced ×4, they're not going to leave because Donald Trump wants to have a property in Gaza or have gas exploration, you know, get these the natural gases off the shores of Gaza. That's not going to happen. And the Badger is asking me also, Salam, my friend, you said if this is the end of the ceasefire, Israel looks like it wants the deal to end without fault. I think that, no, personally, I think that's my personal opinion. I don't think that's the end of the ceasefire. I think Israel wants the ceasefire. I think Netanyahu wants it, but he's trying to satisfy and cover all aspects to protect himself primarily, his image, his political career, his protection from the courts, a coalition, keeping the people who are more suitable for him, protecting the timeline that he wants to operate in. The United States wants to still show the world who's boss, that they can dictate what they want in the region. Because think about it for 1 second. Who is Israel escalating against and who are they bullying? They are escalating against Gaza. They're escalating against the West Bank. So civilians, really and truly, civilians, innocent people, civilian populations. They're threatening Lebanon, saying we want to stay there. A country coming out of 14 years of war, Syria, flexing muscles against them. Do you see them taking the same approach against a country with a proper army, proper power? Do they dare? They don't. They simply don't, because if they failed with the Palestinian resistance that was fighting them, and the fighters were fighting them sometimes barefoot, with bare feet, sometimes with flip-flops, you know. If they're lucky, and one day, you know, they'll have a pair of shoes that are torn a little bit. What are they going to do with a proper country? So they're bullies against the weak. Why? Because they're cowards in nature. Israel never goes to war with a country that can actually give them some proper blows back, right? Look at their response against Iran. What did they do with Iran? This clown show outside of Iranian airspace that was taken down by Iran. Do they dare speak with Egypt, for example, in the same way they do with Gaza or the West Bank or Lebanon? They don't. Why? Because they're cowards. If they're met with something proper, army to army or whatever. So I think they still want a ceasefire, though. And Benjamin Netanyahu knows that it's too costly to break the ceasefire. As a matter of fact, I think that if Benjamin Netanyahu collapses this ceasefire, it will be his end internally. I think this time the streets, well, like Yair Golan, his political enemy in Israel, and the previous IDF deputy chief of staff said, hell will reign in Israel. I think that will happen because you're seeing, the population is seeing the positivity out of having a ceasefire agreement. They're seeing that their loved ones are coming back, de-escalation, no more soldiers dying for no reason. That's a big part of it. Apart from the other facts too, by the way. But he wants to continuously portray this, image of victory, an image of the guy who runs the show, who dictates the era of Israel. But I think they are interested personally. And Yasser, thank you very much for that. Let's see if we're... Sfi, that's a very, very interesting observation. He said the budget approval in Israel, you mean 2025 is due in 40 days or elections will be held. That's true. Ultra-Orthodox won't vote unless conscription law is passed. Will the opposition give in to all Hamas demands or usual genocide? I think, yeah, you're right about that. If the law doesn't pass, you need to have new elections. And that is a very, very sensitive period. And if Benjamin Netanyahu, sides with the Orthodox in his government, who are there for their own reasons, really. It's not like they like Benjamin Netanyahu or anything. They just want their benefits. They want their money. If he sides with them, that's going to create a very, very big problem, because the Israeli population are thinking, hold on a second, some people are exempt from going and serving when we've been going and dying for nothing. There are already so many criticisms on the pointless deaths of the Israeli soldiers in Gaza. Why were they sent? If you reach the ceasefire now, you could have reached 7-8 months ago. Why didn't you do that and save the lives of Israeli soldiers and save the lives of the Israeli prisoners of war? That's why many in Israel call Benjamin Netanyahu a murderer, a massive murderer who is responsible for everything from the 7th of October up until now. It's gonna cause an explosion. It's gonna be problematic. So, but again, Benjamin Netanyahu, he can come up with certain deals. We'll see what he's preparing now. We'll see what he's preparing, because those 40 days are going to be simultaneously coming with either a phase 2, if that's going to be agreed upon, or an extended phase 1. And if he's promising Smotrich to go back to a full-scale war, what is he going to do without enforcing conscription on the remaining parts of the society? And he said, will the opposition give in to all Hamas demands as usual, or as usual genocide? The opposition in Israel is as genocidal as Netanyahu. Israel as a state doesn't have a problem with the concept of genocide and mass murder, because it's founded on racism and hatred and genocide and ethnic cleansing. The only thing is there are different approaches. So there is an extreme maniac, and there is a moderately extreme maniac in Israel. So the moderately extreme maniac will say, let's get the deal out of the way. Let's get everyone back. Let's have some sort of recovery, and then we'll commit a genocide. You know, we always have time for genocide. Mother America and some wonderful European countries, they support us with, support, political support and what have you. We'll continue doing so at one point. So that's how they view it. And that's why they opposed Benjamin Netanyahu so much, because their view was, and if you think about it realistically, that was the view that made more sense, don't even get into a war. Don't even get into a war. Don't start carpet bombing Gaza, because with every move you make in Gaza, there's a risk for an Israeli life. Clearly, Netanyahu has no care. Israel as a state has no care for the lives of the Israeli people. They're using them as cannon fodder for this Zionist experiment in Palestine. That's what they're doing. For the sake of foreign powers, by the way. So they're not detached from foreign powers. Stephen Kelly, anything happened with the ICC yet? Yeah, Trump imposed sanctions on the ICC. Sanctions on the ICC chief prosecutor as well. Just as a show of how much, the United States respects international law. Sanctions. Go ahead. You do something against someone killing children, how dare you? How dare you? Let them kill children in peace and be quiet about it. This is what they want. Not that they think that the ICC, well, they will welcome Netanyahu. They welcome Netanyahu. And X-Fusion is saying, can I ask the way Israel is going, how long do you think it will last for? Like, will Israel disappear and become Palestine again? Yeah, I think that's absolutely going to happen. The question is when. You see, Israel has been buying time. Israel buys time, and they constantly try and delay the inevitable end by the support of many Western countries, by the enormous military support and financial support from the US, by continuing this pseudo-narrative and brainwashing of the Israeli population and manipulating them. But the end is inevitable. The question is when. And the end is inevitable because simply fascism doesn't work. Running a country, the 21st century, based on religious and racial superiority and supremacy and apartheid, it doesn't work. It hasn't worked. What's baffling is the level of thickness that many in Israel have, assuming that it can continue to work with their heads in the sand. Manipulation from mainstream media or no manipulation, the level of ignorance. I mean, geez, you need to be really ignorant to think that it would work. And not seeing your own contradictions, not having any self-reflection whatsoever. But several years, perhaps. And they're worried about it. Like, listen, many of the Israeli leaders saying, look, we're headed towards 80. We have a curse with this number. We don't think we're going to make it. But after 80. Christopher, there's a campaign to expel or get the USA out of the UN and the Article 6, picking up a lot of momentum. That veto, Israel is doomed without the veto. Listen, the UN proved that it's pointless. It might as well be dismantled as an organization. The United Nations is the continuation of the League of Nations, founded by the United States, post-World War II order, primarily serving the interests of the United States. And we saw that it can do absolutely nothing when it has to do something. They're there to show that, you know, there is some sort of gathering of global countries, yet it's undemocratic, it's authoritarian to the core. And I'll give you one example. How many member states of the United Nations support the rights of the Palestinian people, and or how many of them support Palestine? How many of them support Israel? Over 80% support Palestine. Is that represented in the decision making? No. The United Nations, they have the Security Council with permanent members. What do you mean permanent members? Representing who? Exactly. Why isn't there more diversity? They constantly talk and bang on about human rights and international law and blah, blah, blah. When it comes to implementing this international law or enforcing it, nothing. What have they done the past 16 months? The United Nations is pointless. Totally pointless, with or without the United States. That's why there is a rising BRICS. And they don't say that they are an alternative to the UN. No, as a matter of fact, they invited the UN Secretary General to their BRICS summit. And he attended, and it was positive. But that's why they were founded, to counter this Western arrogance in the world. So whether they're there or not, really, I mean, Israel itself said, you know, we're thinking of leaving the UN at one point. And Angela, thank you so much for that, Sister Angela. Good to see you. See if we have anything else before we wrap up. Glenn Oxley, True Promise 3 can't be far away. Well, I'll tell you what, the Iranians have been talking a bit more lately about True Promise 3. One of them was the representative of the IRGC in the funeral of Nasrallah. He said that True Promise 3 is coming at exactly the right time. The other day, there was another comment from another figure in the IRGC saying, True Promise 3 is coming at the right time. Again, not saying that it's imminent, but they're mentioning it. They haven't mentioned it for a while. And the mention is coming at a time where, you know, there's arrogance and breaches happening. By the way, even if they do it, that doesn't mean they want war. By the way, Iran doesn't want war. If anyone thinks that Iran wants war, they don't want war. What they do want is for their interests to be met, and they are also still interested in supporting certain causes in the region. And they have been supporting the Palestinian cause ever since the Islamic Revolution. And with Israel, they know that they can always carry out this attack at the suitable time for them, but not at a time where we are seeing a de-escalation happening. Doesn't matter how flawed it is, it's a process of de-escalation. And there is an argument that the looming threat of a True Promise 3 from Iran had some sort of a contribution to this de-escalation. Not so bright as well. And Glenn Oxley, again, thank you so much for that. Marvin, regarding Lebanon, has Hezbollah gained or lost political power in the government? The only thing is, I don't think there were no new elections to talk about representation in the government. The only thing that was significant in Lebanon is the fact that they now agreed on a president. That's the main progress. And popularity in the street, well, you saw, I mean, with the funeral that happened a couple of days ago, yeah, we had over 1 million people. That's an indication that Hezbollah have popularity and that they're there. And what that indicates, more than Hezbollah as an organization, by the way, is the people's belief and faith in the concept of resistance, because the concept of resistance is beyond any organization. It's beyond Hezbollah, or like, they are representation. They are at the forefront. They are the ones who are, you know, taking the lead and sacrificing. And that was a referendum with millions of people. And guess what? Some of them came from the US and from Europe too. And Marvin, you're saying about a Yemeni prospect of joining the BRICS. It needs help economically. The problem with Yemen is that you have two governments. You have the Sana'a government and you have the other government, Ansarullah, and the other government. And that's a problem for BRICS. You know, you can't be dealing with like a state with an internal split. So unless that is resolved at one point, it's going to be very difficult for Yemen to join unless there is a permanent settlement of the current status, which I don't think the Yemenis want. I think the Yemenis want to protect their territorial integrity and the unity of their whole country, despite the differences. But the BRICS, I do not believe that they will allow Yemen in up until they resolve that. Plus, they have criterias, the BRICS. But I think they are a natural. They would be a natural. There would be a natural. That would be a natural move for Yemen. And Stephen, why haven't the BRICS countries sanctioned the Zaev state yet? Well, why? There are many whys. Why is not just the BRICS. Why have Arab states allowed them to get away with that? Why are Western countries still arming Israel and spreading lies? Why are many countries still legitimizing them? There are many, many whys, and they're not restricted to the BRICS. And the BRICS also, they're not like a military front, although they could have done other stuff too. They could have done things financially. But look at the Arab states. Take it from the closest states, like really. The whys begin very close. Look at the Palestinian Authority. Why is the Palestinian Authority blaming the Palestinian resistance and siding with Israel? There are lots of whys in this, and they start way closer than the BRICS. You know, BRICS countries, global countries. They have so many things. Resistance Quest as well. Thank you so much. And almost done. Omsi, do you think the Omsi? Do you think the Turco-Zionist balkanization of Syria will harm Palestinian cause for liberation? You said it all from the formation of that question. Now, I think, listen, let's be serious. Let's be serious about Syria. I don't think that Israel will be succeeding in the long term in Syria and even in the short term. Israel just made an announcement. There was a report coming following certain communication that happened between Turkey and Israel about their presence in South Syria. The United States looks like it's going to completely ditch the SDF SDF showed willingness to join the central government, that would be the biggest problem resolved. The other problem would leave is Israel. Israel, what happened today in Syria? What statements happened today in Syria? There were a couple of statements happening from Israel. What did Benjamin Netanyahu say? Benjamin Netanyahu said, we're not going to allow the Syrian army to have any presence in South Syria. South Syria needs to be completely disarmed. What else did he say? He said that we need to protect the Druze community in Syria. Simultaneously, what happened in Syria? A random group of armed people from primarily Druze areas came out with a military parade. A couple of dozens of people, not many. The religious leader of the Druze community in Syria said, they don't represent us. They don't represent our consensus. We didn't have any authority. They didn't have any authority. There was a senior Druze figure from the Israeli army trying to communicate with certain elements of the Druze communities inside of Syria. All of that, what did that lead to? That led to mass protests in South Syria, in Dira, and in other parts too, calling Netanyahu a pig, and rejecting all of these calls to split and divide Syria. Israel is worried from what's happening in Syria. Israel is worried after the collapse of Bashar al-Assad. Israel is worried from the Turkish influence inside of Syria. As a matter of fact, Israel is saying that there is a new front being formed in front of them, and that will be bigger than the front that happened before, 10 times bigger. And in relation to the harm of the cause of the Palestinian liberation, to the contrary, to the absolute contrary. 50-something years of the previous administration's presence in Syria, who had a very large chunk of their country occupied by Israel, the Golan Heights, and they didn't really do anything to get it back. Did that liberate Palestine? Did it? Did we hear about the treacherousness of the previous administration from his closest allies, from Iran and from Russia? All of these things are important. So no, not at all, because the Palestinian cause has become global now. It's no longer restricted to, a couple of Arab states. No. It's a global, universal cause now. And that cause is not going to stop with Syria or Lebanon or it's not going to happen. And the primary reason is what happened in the past 15 months, by the way, nothing made something happen like this at this scale ever since the establishment of the State of Israel. I mean, if you gathered every certain group in the world supporting the Palestinian cause to come with a campaign, they wouldn't have raised awareness as much as what Israel did contributed to raise awareness in the past 15, 16 months. So it's beyond Syria and it's beyond Lebanon. So long as there are people calling for the rights of the Palestinian people, and primarily they will be from Palestine, by the way. This began in Palestine and it will end in Palestine as well. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Thank you for all of your contributions and questions. Thanks to everyone who sent supers too. Let me try and see if I can get all of the names list. The Virus, Exfusions, Yasir, Angela, Not So Bright, Glenn, Resistance Quest, and Exfusion. Again, thank you so much. In the meantime, everyone, stay blessed, take care, and I will hopefully see you soon in the next video or live stream. Peace, everyone, and take care.